I think it's just going to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and finally it's going to be so weird that people are going to have to talk about how weird it is. Eventually people are going to say, what the hell is going on? It's not enough to say it's nuts. You have to explain why it's so nuts. The invention of artificial life, the cloning of human beings, possible contact with extraterrestrials, the systems which are in place to keep the world sane are utterly inadequate to the forces that have been unleashed.
Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Guy Anderson. Be sure to check out my films. Doors of Perception is on Amazon Prime, Occult Louisiana is on Tubi, Roku Channel, Apple, and many more. We are booking guests for October. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Visit our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. It is also the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, where we feature some of your favorite podcasts and content creators. Today I want to welcome back to the show Guy Anderson. He is an author and researcher that started his fascination with conspiracy theories and hidden occult history at a very young age. His recent books focus on the mysteries of the Tartarian Empire. Guy, welcome back. How you doing?
I'm doing really well, thank you. Thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Like I told you before we started, there was many requests to get you back on, so here we are. Really enjoyed the discussion last time. We got a great introduction into your work exploring the possibilities surrounding the Tartarian Empire and Satan's Little Season. And today we're going to peel back more of the endless layers that we find when looking into these occulted topics. There is a lot to get to, and I know you only have an hour, but before we do, remind the audience just a little bit about yourself and let them know how they can find more about you.
Well, I'm what you would call a conspiracy theorist, I suppose. I am an ex-Freemason. I joined about 20 years ago. My journey down the rabbit hole started in my late teens. My father started leaving books around and wanted to encourage me to look at alternative history. So I joined the Freemasons thinking I would find out more and didn't. And then about 6 years ago, I stumbled across someone called Max Egan, who introduced me to the world of Tartaria. The biggest civilization no one's ever heard of. And it became my life. I started exploring this rabbit hole, and it turned into a warren. I started finding old books and information within literature, Marco Polo's travels and old encyclopedias and so on. And it's sort of become my life, really, since 2020. I found myself with 9 months sat at home with nothing much to do, and having sort of studied Freemasonry and what's going on in Antarctica and what happened with 9/11 and so on. This blew everything out of the water. So since then, I've written 2 books. I have a website, which is the tartarianempire.co.uk. And you can get signed copies from there. But also I have a blog on there, which contains articles that I've written that I can't put on my Facebook page because I'm shadow banned as it is. So I'm walking really a very thin tightrope at the moment with Facebook and YouTube, demonetized from YouTube. So yeah, I started a Facebook group. I wrote my first book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, really to put all my notes down on paper, because my memory isn't great. I have to write everything down. And people started to buy the book, which led to the second book, Rise of the Clones, which is a deeper dive into human cloning. So here I am, 6 years on, and I keep uncovering more and more things. I would say at least every week I find something new about Tartaria that I didn't know before. But I think that's partly because it's becoming a little bit closer to being mainstream now. But that in a nutshell is my journey, I suppose.
Right on. You're right. It does seem that more people are becoming aware that there is something to this Tartarian Empire, and especially over the past couple of years, I've noticed more and more, and I think your work is really helping bring a lot of that to the forefront. I thought today we could start with a bit of a timeline for the Tartarian reset, looking back at when everything started to get infiltrated.
Right. Well, Tartaria goes back quite a long way. Originally, it was the Vinca Tartarian era, and that happened after Atlantis. So 50,000 years ago, you've got Atlantis, and then about 11,000 BC, it's gone. We have the deluge and what we now refer to as the Younger Dryas period. And then it comes back. It's reignited, and I from my research, I believe that there were survivors. You know, not everybody was wiped out, and this knowledge of how to harness energy from the ether, cymatics, working with frequency and vibration, understanding esoteric knowledge as well, and also sacred geometry, all of these things, and working with ley lines and energy grids, that was passed down. And then we saw a reintroduction of the Tartarian period up until relatively recently. So it's been wiped out before, and along the way we've had other periods of time, the Roman Empire and so on. But Tartaria itself, it goes back a very long way to Magog, Noah's grandson. So that was really considered to be the beginning of it. And then we have people like Gilgamesh, who is considered to be a Tartarian ruler, and also Genghis Khan, King Solomon. These were all key components. See, the problem is our timeline has been altered. They've added 800 years to it. They did that in around the 1700s. And by them, I mean the Jesuits. And so really, we've got to shave a bit of time off. So people refer to the Tartarian period, which was 1,000 years, ending in 1776, as being the millennial reign of Christ. So if at 1776 we knock 800 years off, the year would have been 976 AD or CE. So we're not a million miles away from 1,000-year reign. And that isn't saying that Jesus ruled the empire or ruled the earth for that period of time, but kind of everything worked how he wanted it to. So we vibrated in a higher frequency. We understood the importance of frequency, from church bells to music and pipe organs, classical music. It's no coincidence that church bells, pipe organs, and classical music all are all at 432 hertz, which is the frequency of all living matter. It's the frequency of the earth itself. And then the Rockefellers changed that in the 1950s to 440 hertz and made it the standard frequency for music. They replaced the bells and so on. So it was a period of time where everything was built, as they say, by the angels. And by that, they mean people with a higher level of intelligence, and perhaps not quite like us. But they built cathedrals, star forts, and the most incredible structures across the earth. And so 1776, we got the start of New World Order. Everybody knows that, I think. The back of the American dollar bill tells everybody there. You've got the Statue of Liberty as well, which was bastardized to show people that was now Lucifer breaking free of the chains, and we enter Satan's little season. So it was the Jesuits, and they slowly infiltrated from around the 1600s. Over a period of about 200 years, they infiltrated every organization, every government, every royal family, and every town and city, ultimately, to take over and take full control, as they still do today.
When we look at the era that is supposed to be the millennial reign of Christ, you mentioned a little bit about the technology that was possibly used, and it would be a lot different than our modern technology, because much of what we have in our modern time doesn't benefit humanity in any real way, especially if you have technology that you can heal with. And you mentioned the changing of the tuning from 432 to 440 hertz. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about the level of technology that we're talking about and the effects it had changing that tuning.
Yeah, sure. So cathedrals, I mean, cathedral really, I mean, some people will say now that it actually, the word is actually to do with where the, whoever is taking the sermon sits. That is what the name cathedral is based upon, but that's not true. Again, you know, a lot of our history has been falsified, and a lot of words have been altered. The meaning's changed with so many words that we use. United is a good example of that. But my favourite, and I'm going off piste here, my favourite is antibiotic. You know, we go to the doctor to get some medicine, and we're giving something that in Latin says against human life. You know, so cathedrals were originally cathode rails. And that is cathode. It's a center of energy. It's something that generates electricity, energy, if you like. So they were using cathedrals and churches and starforts as centers of healing, where you would go there, you would meditate, and you could balance your chakras, essentially. And that was the purpose of them. Because in the Bible, you know, no one ever told you to go to church. Jesus actually said specifically, don't go to a building to pray. You do it in solitude, and you certainly don't listen to someone telling you how to do it. And that's a false prophet. So, you know, we know that these buildings were hijacked by the Jesuits. And so through the bells, which were emitting 432 hertz, you had this sense of euphoria. The frequency was working to harmonize you. In Germany, they also had something called Tiergardens, and that's somewhere where you would walk your pets, your dog in particular, around the grounds. They resonated at 432 hertz to prevent your dog becoming unwell, or if it was unwell, to fix it. And of course, Raymond Rife dedicated his life to working on the Rife machine that was zapping cancer cells through frequency.
Wow.
And ultimately, as Tessa said, you know, in the end, everything is frequency, everything's vibration. But also in the churches, you had organs. Again, they were playing music at 432 hertz. So it was an experience to go into one of these buildings, and everybody was well. But by changing it to 440 and changing music as well to 440, people will come out feeling somber, to say the very least, but it can have a negative effect, and the music can too. You know, a lot of music today is designed to install fear or anger. You wouldn't see many people coming out of an opera house and wanting to start a fight in the street. And that isn't just down to the sort of people we're talking about, because there are some vile people out there that listen to this, the parasites. I'm talking about what the frequency actually does to the human body. So the Rife machine is a very good example of how frequency can heal. And that is what they worked on, because, you know, a happy nation was prosperous and productive too. There wasn't, from what I've read, much need for any kind of judicial process, because there wasn't crime, not as we know it today. Everyone had what they needed and everybody was well. And I guess ultimately a lot of crime, certainly here in the UK, is down to people not having anything. So they will steal. Now, if you remove that problem, if everyone has what they need, then you can eliminate an awful lot of crime. And also the need for drugs is removed, and alcohol too. There isn't any evidence to suggest that they really drank, or at least they didn't drink excessively.
I was just about to ask you about the alcohol. You write about how it may have been introduced in a different way than we used it before.
Yeah, I believe so. Alcohol actually does translate to ultimately to mean to detach yourself from your soul. And that's why we have spirits, the strongest alcohol of all. So I think we've always drank wine and things like mead and beer and so on, fermented, fruit that's fermented, but not in excess. And I think we've been encouraged to get drunk and become addicted in some cases to alcohol. I think there are a number of reasons for this. One, people are using it to numb their lives. They'll get through the working week knowing that on Friday they can get smashed, spend the weekend with a hangover, and then back to Monday morning and go through it all again with that glimmer of hope that at the end of the week they can go out and get smashed again. Some people have to drink every day, and I think that when you're doing it in excess, that there's an underlying problem that needs fixing. So I think it's been given to us as a crutch. So I think, and I'm no prude, I used to drink quite a lot, and I've tried a lot of things in my life, but I think that gambling, alcohol, pornography, I think things like that were introduced by the Jesuits, who before that were called the Phoenicians, to kind of poison our minds, really, and our souls and our spirits, to give us addictions. And also, of course, when you're drunk, you don't really know what you're doing a lot of the time. You say things you don't mean. And it can cause problems. A lot of violence comes from excessive drinking. And of course, the parasites love nothing more than watching us harm each other. That's one of their favorite things of all. That's why we have war. There's the civil wars that have taken place. That people, the parasites are sitting back and watching people kill each other and sort of almost absorbing their energy. So I do believe that the push on alcohol and to get drunk is all part of the plan to detach us from who we really are.
You mentioned Civil War. Others believe that during this time period, it was a very crucial time for the parasites to finalize this reset. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. These civil wars were important to remove the previous civilization. Now, I've spoken at length with people who have ancestors that claim they fought in the Napoleonic Wars in Europe. And in, I would say, 9 out of 10 cases, they were fighting themselves. So they would see, once they got up close to the enemy, if you like, they would see that they were wearing the same uniform. They were carrying the same flags and banners. That this was an opportunity for them to kill each other. So we think, if you look at the statistics between 1776 and 1876, 3.35 billion people died in 100 years. So and if you look at the world population in 1776, it was only 770 million. So they wiped out more people than actually existed if we go from the narrative provided. So it doesn't make any sense. So I think war happens for a number of reasons. It's not financial. It's got nothing to do with who's making money, because the parasites don't need any more money, and it's fiat currency anyway, so they can put another zero on a bank balance and no one's going to know, and no one can do anything about it if they care.
Yeah.
So to go to war is usually to get rid of people and to get rid of architecture. So they'll carpet bomb somewhere. I mean, look at what happened after 9/11. We suddenly go over to the Middle East, and the first thing that we do, I mean, it's an illegal war to start with. We're going after someone no one's ever heard of. That's part of a group, a militia that no one has ever heard of before, or certainly not in any big way. And the first thing they do is bomb the site where they claim to have found the tomb of Gilgamesh. How did that help? What sort of military strategy was behind bombing a tomb? I thought they were going after a terrorist organization. So yeah, architecture, destroying evidence and reducing the population, and sitting back and loving every moment of it.
Going back to the level of technology before the reset, many also speculate that as far as our transportation goes, we had much more efficient ways to travel, including things like airships.
Absolutely. Yeah, when I first started looking into Tartaria, I couldn't find much on it. There wasn't anything really out there. I had to go on the dark web, and fortunately, I found a few things on BitChute, but there was nothing. There were no books or anything. And then I stumbled across a group of people referring to it as the Empire of Free Travel, and they were saying that that travel was free. You would board an airship on the Eiffel Tower, which was basically a Tesla tower, but also a docking station for airships. You would get on it there, and you would get off wherever you wanted to get off. You know, the next stop, or around the world, or over the world, depending on whether you think it's flat or a spinning ball.
Right.
You know, I've got no axe to grind either way, and I'd never criticize anyone for their beliefs on that, because I haven't been into space and I haven't circumnavigated either. So what do I know? But yeah, the Empire of Free Travel is how it's also referred to, and people were using airships, and of course they got rid of the airships by blowing one up. But the Hindenburg, incident, and they didn't want free travel. They'd refined petrol, oil into petroleum, and there was a big push with the Standard Oil Company, again the Rockefellers, one of the main parasitic families, seeing an opportunity to make incredible wealth by controlling the fuel needed for people to get from A to B. So yeah, but also the people also talk about vacuum tunnels too, and I think that that's what Musk is doing right now. I think he's reopening with his boring company old Tartarian vacuum tunnels, and I think they were using vacuum trains, and I think that they never stopped using them. I think certain families and certain people are getting from A to B very quickly, and that they're using these. I think they're very much still out there.
You also write about the Desposini. Did I pronounce that right? The
Yeah.
descendants of Jesus and the keepers of his knowledge that most likely facilitated much of the doctrine during the millennial reign.
Yeah, it's an interesting subject. When I put that post up on Facebook, a lot of people thought that I'd been reading a Dan Brown novel, but this goes back a lot earlier than that. It was actually a book I read on James, and James was Jesus's brother, but no one really talks about him. He was his older brother, and Jesus looked up to him. Obviously, when I'm saying Jesus, I mean Yeshua, but it's easier for this if we use Jesus. But James was his older brother, and it stands to reason that if we look at Jesus's relationship, for example, with Mary Magdalene, I mean, the Roman Catholic Church 1 minute said that she was a prostitute, and then they changed their minds, and now they don't say that she is. They were a couple. And I find it very unlikely that Jesus and his brother would not have had children. I think that's highly unlikely. And what sort of added to that was I recently went to Portugal, and I went to Tomar, which is the home, if you like, the base of the Knights Templar. And it's named Tamar after Sarah Tamar, allegedly the daughter of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Now, you start asking questions like that around Tamar, and everybody wants to tell you all about it. You ask questions like that around here, people think you're mad. So I think that there's a lot more to it than that. So I don't think that Jesus was like us. I think that well, this will shock a few people, but from the digging I've done, I think that he did come from somewhere else, but I think he actually was Anunnaki. And for people that are a bit confused about what the Anunnaki were or are, they're not all nefarious. This isn't an evil reptilian race. They're a bad and good of everything. And we've got that with Enki and Enlil, the first Anunnaki that we start hearing about in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The people responsible, or the beings responsible for us being here right now. We know in the Old Testament that they're talking about Enki and Enlil, and we know that the Epic of Gilgamesh is what the Torah, the Quran, and ultimately the King James Bible is based upon. So I think that he was sent, and therefore that his brother was too. from somewhere else. And I think that they've done that several times. I think that there have been a number of people sent here to try and repair or get us back on the right track. Perhaps Mohammed, several other people on the way. But people who have dug a lot further than me into Genghis Khan believe that he was actually one of Jesus's sons.
Really? Wow.
Well, yeah, Genghis Khan's father, his name actually translates to Yeshua. Genghis Khan was, perhaps the most well-known ruler of Tartaria. If we knock the 800 years off the timeline, it all tallies. Jesus spent a long time in Tibet, and there is a place in Crimea, or Ukraine now, that is covered. It's a mound. It's completely covered in crucifixes, and they believe that that is where Jesus is buried. And there are a lot of people from Mongolia say that that is where Genghis Khan's father is buried.
Wow.
So I've been dotting a few I's and crossing a few T's, but there is no way of finding out any more than that. So I think that Jesus was sent here from somewhere else. His brother clearly was too, and that I believe that it was the same people that we refer to as Anunnaki. Obviously, they're not called that. They actually refer to themselves as Sam. They are Sam, S-A-M, Sam. And they don't have names like we do. So they send good and they send bad. And for anybody who's interested in digging a bit deeper on that, there are books out there about James, Jesus' older brother. Some people claim that he was a twin, but from what I've read and researched, he was actually older.
Well, if we're to believe research like yours and others that claim that the Anunnaki, the malevolent side, is still in control today, possibly bloodlines that are related to the ruling class, would you say that the Desposini still has bloodlines alive today?
Yeah, I do. And I think that that's why there's this big push from genealogy organizations like Ancestry.com to get us to send our DNA in. I don't think that they care whether or not we can build our family tree, get it printed and mount it in a frame. They're looking for people, and they're looking for specific blood groups. I believe the blood group that they're looking for is Rh null. That's what they're looking for. And the last person that I spoke to that is Rh null referred to himself as Marduk. This person was a remote viewer for the NSA and NASA.
Wow.
Yeah. And he came with credentials. He wasn't just imagining this stuff. I know him.
Interesting.
And I followed him for a while. Yeah, he worked 7 years with the NSA doing remote viewing. And he got that gig when he applied to work for them, doing something else to do with frequency, actually. And when he had his medical and they took a blood sample, off he went. His feet didn't touch the ground. He was taken away. And that was it. Your remote viewing. They kept testing him, all sorts of tests he had done. So it's the rarest of them all. But I think there's another one. So I think that people like these parasitic bloodline families, really the Rothschilds, and they're all Rothschilds ultimately. They can change their name to Rockefeller, Bush, or over here in the UK, Windsor or Blair. Tony Blair's a Rockefeller. Churchill's a Rockefeller. A Rothschild. They're all Rothschilds, and they do that to hide their bloodline. They don't want people thinking it's another bloody Rothschild here. So they're ultimately, they all descend from Marduk, who in Egyptian mythology would be Amun-Ra. That's who they actually descend from, Marduk. He said when he fled that he was leaving everything behind to the Ra-childs, to the children of Ra, the Ra-childs. So you can kind of work it out for yourself, really. So I think that they've got a particular blood group. Now, I got some information on this, and I can't say who gave it to me, or actually, to be fair, what gave it to me, because I don't know. I mean, it was weird, but they're saying that this isn't, they're not human like you and I. these people, whether we're talking about the Rothschilds or Rockefellers, they're not the same as us. They're not. They don't have the same DNA. They do not have the same blood. They don't love. They don't have the emotions like we do. They have no creativity. There's no artistic element to their genetic makeup. They are nefarious. They're dark, very low vibrational. On the other hand, you've got people that have come here to enlighten, to guide, and to help. Now, that's the bloodline that I think the parasites are looking for. And I think the swabs that were done during the pandemic, I think that was an opportunity. I think they're trying to find the bloodline. Right. And I think that what they're going to do with that is, when you look at who owns Ancestry.com, for example, that's Blackstone. Blackstone, who were part of BlackRock initially, or the same people. Blackstone own Ancestry.com. It's the largest DNA database in the world.
Wow.
Or I say on the world, because we're not in it, are we? We're stood on it. So it's the largest that exists. Now, it's no coincidence that that company is also investing an awful lot of its money in bioweaponry.
Wow.
So to find out who's who, and then have the ability to work on weapons, biological weapons, that can remove certain people, certain bloodlines and groups
targeting
of people.
Genetics, right?
Absolutely. There's no other reason that Blackstone would want to take Ancestry.com. What interest would they have? This isn't their ballpark. This isn't normally where they would invest, but they did, and they own it. So there's something going on there, but I don't want to spill the beans too much, because it's an entire chapter of my second book, and it takes a hell of a lot explaining, because I go right back to the beginning of Blackstone forming from BlackRock. And for people who don't know much about BlackRock or Vanguard, I always say this: at the bottom of every rabbit hole, there is a van guarding a BlackRock.
Let's talk about some of the more modern evidence that we can look at for these resets, such as the World's Fairs, Chicago fires. In fact, these fires that took place all across the planet, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere. They either had a fire or a flood. Even the little town up the road from me, it's got a population of about 15,000 people. They had a fire. So yeah, they burnt as much as they could. So when the reset was taking place, leading up to this, and still carrying on into the early 1900s, they were flooding and burning as much as they could. Certain buildings they kept for themselves. But if there was a building that they didn't need, or a group of buildings that they didn't want, that they couldn't explain, then they would burn them down. And that's what they did with the World's Fairs. They were a whitewashing and brainwashing exercise to show the new civilization that actually look at what we can achieve, and come in and marvel at the technology that's going to be available soon. But this was all antiquitech. This is reverse engineered technology. And the buildings, they were painted white. And they were painted white so you couldn't see that they had aged and weathered. And you could just pick one, the Chicago World's Fair, and just go onto Wikipedia or Google and say how many blocks, how many granite blocks, how many panes of glass were there, how many bricks did it take, how much tarmac or concrete, or what did they need, what were the components needed, and the quantity of those materials, and then find out where the nearest quarry was.
Wow.
And you'll find that there wasn't one. So no labour records, no receipts, no records of anyone staying there during the construction. And they'll say, well, we might have had a smaller population in Chicago then, but we brought people in from all across America to help. Really? Well, who was building the buildings in their towns and cities at the same time that this was going on? So it falls apart quite quickly, and you'll find any World's Fair, the architect responsible, according to the narrative, won't have built anything like it before, and nothing like it ever again. And then they all have these accidental fires. But the key is that it's the word great. So you got the Great Fire of Chicago. the Great Fire of London. And they use great in the same way as they do with wars and resets. The idea of that word isn't because it was massive or it was spectacular. It actually means to lose one generation of history. So it's the same as great great grandparent. So your great grandparent tells your grandparent a story and they lose a bit of it. Your grandparent tells your parent, they lose a bit more. They tell you, you lose a bit more. You then tell your children the same story, and it's completely different to what your great grandparents said, and you've lost half the information. And this all kicked off with the Great Fire of London. The Great Fire of London in 1666, and with dates they added 1,000 years to the timeline because it's easier than adding 800.
Yeah.
So the Great Fire of London was 666, the year that took place. And what they did then was the Vatican declared everybody internationally deceased. And at that moment in time, we became a dead legal fiction. In the States, you refer to it as a straw man. That started with the Great Fire of London. That was the reset. Wow. So great means to lose a generation of history and knowledge and memory. That's what great means.
Let's take a closer look at what's happening now with all the events that have unfolded, especially in the past couple of years, with the changes they've made, with the erasures they've made from literature and the internet. It would seem like they are attempting another quote-unquote great reset, this time using technology, bioweapons, psychological warfare, all the things that we've been subjected to over the past few years. It seems to be ramping up every year. Now we have AI, which has showed up this year more powerful and bigger than ever. And it seems like there's an attempt to implement AI as a governing force for the planet. So talk a little bit about what you see happening now and some of the reasons for it.
Well, they're depopulating. So in the past, the last Great Reset in 1776, they repopulated with babies, and many people, myself included, believe that was through cloning, because they doubled the population. Having lost 3.3 billion people, they doubled the population in 100 years, despite that huge loss. And it's not possible to do that naturally. And also, if you look at the Cabbage Patch Babies through the postcards or the films or any of the propaganda, they're all Caucasian. They're all little white babies. So the Jesuits repopulated and whitewashed history. So it wasn't just buildings they were whitewashing the civilization too. So, and those children were needed for the Industrial Revolution. And that's where miners comes from. That's why you refer to a child as a miner, because they were the ones doing the mining. And if you look at any images of the Industrial Revolution, it is children working in the factories. Where are the adults? They don't appear in any of the shots that you see. Now, they must have been doing something. I think there just weren't that many adults around in comparison. So they repopulated with babies. And cloning technology is nothing new. It's in Adam and Eve. Taking a rib, making another. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the Elohim. They all talk about it. But this time they've got AI. We know that AI is replacing a lot of jobs. We know that robotics are too. And I think that what they're now doing is there's a big push on us becoming dependent on using things like ChatGPT, which is learning from us. How we communicate, it's sort of using that to become more human itself, more sentient. And I think that's the big push. I think they're going to get rid of us. I think 2020 was the beginning of that. I think that they're using not just medical interventions to harm us, but we're being attacked through frequency too. The cell towers are doing all sorts of damage. Here there were some calves born recently where they've got a mast in the field and they were all born blind. The last time I checked, which was over a year ago, there were 32,000 independent reports just in the UK on the harms of 5G. So we know that they're attacking us through that. They're fluoridating our water, so our pineal gland doesn't work properly. They're putting rapeseed oil in our food. They're chemtrailing. The farmers are struggling. In America, you've got Bill Gates buying farmland so he can not grow crops. They're slowly poisoning us, and it's like the boiled frog. You know, the frog in the boiling pan. It's a slow burn. We don't realise because it's gradual. We are being killed. They'll need a certain number of us. My guess is going to be about 500,000, and AI will take care of everything else. Now, we need to stop that from happening. I think at the same time as well, they're homogenizing us. We all look the same, we all eat the same stuff, we wear the same clothes, we watch the same things, we use the same gadgets. There's a big push for digital currency, one world government. We're going to have one religion, one ruler, one currency, and kind of one ethos. And behind a lot of this is Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of Britain, who's a Rothschild, and he, so I've been told, will soon become the European Prime Minister. And he's pushing for one world government and one world religion. He actually has his own faith organization trying to push this narrative. He was very, very outspoken during the pandemic. I thought he'd disappeared. You know, he was prime minister for a bit, caused an illegal war, disappeared into the sunset, got a pat on the back for it, and then he goes quiet. But he popped out in 2020, and he's now bigger than ever. And if you look at the predictions of Dolores Cannon into who the next Antichrist will be, she described him to a T, apart from one thing. A lot of people have said, well, she said that he would appear on the banks of the Nile. Well, he did. He owned land there and was seen there exactly when Dolores Cannon said he would be. So Tony Blair is going to spearhead this reset. It's in plain sight. When he became Prime Minister, there were a lot of campaigns to stop people from voting for him. And these pictures of him were depicted with demonic eyes. So there are people out there that know, but I was sent an MI5 document that had... You had to read between the lines, but it referred to him as the Antichrist.
Really?
It's declassified. Yeah, you can find it online.
That's funny. We have so many people looking at either Trump or J.D. Vance as being the next Antichrist just because of all the agendas that are attempting to put in, but you're saying no, it's Blair.
They're all cousins. Yeah, that's what I believe, and that's the information I've got. The idea with they're all friends. I mean, that's the first thing you have to understand. That these are blood relatives. So you might see Trump arguing with Putin, or it could be Keir Starmer having a row with somebody else. They're friends. They're all friends. And the rulers are all bloodline families. Trump's a Rothschild. They're all Rothschilds, ultimately. One gets to play the bad guy. The other one gets to play the good guy. They're all bad. They're all bad. They're parasitic, just because they've changed their name. So some will sort of lure you into a trap, a sort of sense of false security, really. You might think that they're doing some really great things right now and they're going to change the world for the better. That's exactly what they want you to think, so you trust them. But again, it's the boiling frog analogy. You're going to suddenly be hit with something that doesn't stack up. I mean, in America, you've got the asylums. They're talking about the asylums again, aren't they? That they're going to start filling asylums up and return to how that used to be. And we're also going to see World's Fairs again. And it's kind of like we're going back to what happened in 1776, Wow. So my bottom line is, don't trust any of them. Don't believe any of them. You've got to turn the news off. You've actually got to. And I know it's painful because people want to know what's going on. You're not being told the truth. So don't listen to it. There was a survey recently done, and it was, over here we've got the BBC, British Broadcasting Company, but I call it blatantly buggering children. Because that's really the ethos of their organisation. if you stop someone in the street who's never watched the news, never read a newspaper in their life, and doesn't own a television or a radio, 90% of those people will be more informed about what's actually happening right now than people that watch the news every day.
Yeah.
That tells you everything you need to know,
Right.
surely. You've got to turn it all off because it's propaganda. So if you don't take any notice, if no one watches the news, no one reads the newspapers, no one listens to the news or shares clips of, did you see what Trump just did? Did you see what Keir Starmer's up to now? And King Jong-un's just said this. Turn it off. Turn it off. If no one's listening, there'll be no news. We're fueling this. We've got to switch off now. And it's so important we do that quickly.
I saw you post recently about the dead internet theory. In my perspective, this also connects to something controversial that's often brought up, the possibility that certain people don't have a divine spark. They are what you'd call NPCs in this reality. This may be directly connected if the dead internet theory is correct, but for those that may not be familiar, talk a little bit about that and some of the insights you've gotten from it.
Yeah, I mean, again, I've mentioned her before, Dolores Cannon. I mean, she refers to these people as soulless, and she estimates that, or estimated, that 80% of the population do not have a soul. And that sounds really awful. It's sad, isn't it, to hear that? And but I don't think that it's actually that accurate in a description of someone. I think what she's saying is about 80% of the people don't have this connection that makes us question things. So I think that it's boiled down to the reason you're doing this podcast and the reason I'm talking to you is because for some time you and I and people like us, the people watching this, have felt that things that go on are wrong. And this might go back to school. It might go back to sitting in a maths class and thinking this is pointless. I don't need to know any of this, and staring out the window. Or asking questions and then being told to shut up. Asking too many questions. And I think that is because memory is carried within our DNA. We know that. So we know that in your DNA you are carrying the memory of your ancestors. And obviously it's diluted over time. But if your ancestors were clones, if they were used to repopulate for the new civilization, for now, the common era, right now, then there would be no information of what happened before. So you wouldn't question things. You'll roll up your sleeve and take the jab. You know, you'll go and vote thinking that they're going to actually add them up at the end and you're going to make a difference. You're going to believe that. You're going to believe that you can make a difference by who you vote for, and the government would never do anything to harm us. And obviously we know that's not true, but most people don't. Most people believe what's going on in the news, and they believe that COVID was the direct result of someone eating a bat, or that actually it was accidentally leaked from a lab in Wuhan. But we know, we know different. We know that that's not the case. So I think that NPCs, as we call them now, are descendants from pure cloning.
That's what I was going to
where it may
ask
well be
that there's a connection there.
Absolutely. So it may well be that one of my great grandparents were a clone and the other one wasn't. So maybe I'm carrying just a little bit of information compared to somebody else. But there are people out there that it will just be pure, and they're the ones that will be rolling up their sleeve and supporting anything, and they're the ones protesting, thinking that it's going to make a difference, and it doesn't. The government don't care if you go and protest somewhere, because they don't care about you or what you think. I mean, we can start a civil war. That's different, isn't it? That the people would have to notice and do something about that. But of course, they would just, and I'm not suggesting for one moment we do something like that. But I sometimes think it's coming close. I think people are getting really angry. But, protesting, petitions and so on, it very rarely makes any difference, because ultimately the people in charge aren't affected by us standing in the street screaming and shouting. It doesn't matter. They carry on doing what they were doing anyway. They couldn't care less about our feelings and thoughts on things. So I think that the people that are angry right now about certain things are being made to be angry because they're watching the news. And I think if we can disengage from it, then we can start focusing on us. And I think that that's what we've got to do. We've got to understand that we are more powerful than we've been led to believe. We have a connection to the source. We're connected to each other. We used to be telepathic. Some of us still have the ability to think about someone and then they suddenly text or ring or walk past you in the street. We still have that. We need to work on honing those skills and kind of self-improvement, really, and spend the time we would doom scrolling or watching the news on actually working on us. And there's two things that the parasites hate. One is us uniting, forgetting what colour and religion we are for a moment, putting that to one side and saying that in the dark we all kind of look the same. And if you're being cut out of a car after an accident and you need a blood transfusion, you're not going to start asking what colour or religion the person was that's donating the blood. So to pack it in, it doesn't matter. It's a divide and conquer tactic. And they also fear knowledge. The more knowledge we have, the more that worries them. So when we're sharing information like this with each other and using social media platforms or books like I write to get this information out there, they don't want people to hear or read this stuff. So we've got to unite and we've got to gain more knowledge that they've hidden, and that will topple them. People will then truly understand what's going on, what happened before, and what's coming ahead, and we can be prepared for it. But I think that that's where it is unity and working on ourselves and understanding that we don't need this Stockholm syndrome where we kind of despise the people we rely on in the time of a crisis. We can rely on ourselves. We've got the answers inside us. We know right from wrong, and we're a lot more powerful than we give ourselves credit for.
100%. I'm always saying how these collective solutions put forth by the parasitic ruling class never benefit humanity. It's always going to be up to the individual and the changes that we can make in our own lives. It does have this reverberation effect, and to me, this is the only thing that can make real change in our reality. I saw you also make a post recently how many people are perceiving that time is moving faster. And being that time is a construct to begin with, this is very concerning. I imagine it could cause a lot of problems for humanity in general and for the individual person, problems mentally with their health, emotionally. Basically, everything that we perceive based on time is going to be stressful for the human.
I totally agree. And I put that post up because I thought it was just me until recently. And a couple of people that I've spoken to that they're not on board with what I believe. They've said, well, the reason you think time's going faster now is because you're getting older. And I said, well, that's not relevant. My age has got nothing to do with how quickly time feels that it's traveling. And I understand that it's it's man-made. It's not a real thing, but we do have an internal body clock. We as when we were primitive, then we would have been dependent upon sunlight, natural light. So we would have got up when it's light and gone to bed when it's dark, and perhaps slept a bit more during the darker months and been more productive during the summer months. So there is an internal body clock, and I started mentioning it to younger people, in their 20s, saying, do you feel like time slowed down? And that's what I said, because I didn't want to lead them to thinking what I thought. No, I've got the opposite problem. It seems like it's going quicker. Ever since the pandemic, it's like it's going quicker and quicker, and I keep having to change my clock. Or anything analog. I keep having to change the clock on my cooker and the clock on the wall. And I thought, well, I don't know how this has happened, but I think that 2020 was a major reset. It wasn't just about an exercise in control and seeing what they could get away with. I think that it was a lot bigger than that, and that they have manipulated time itself. And I think they're speeding things up So we feel like we're rushed. We're not having time to think. I speak to people quite often who say that they don't have time to read. And it makes me want to throttle them because I think I see your activity on Facebook, and one person in particular who doesn't have time to read will like every single comment on my posts.
Yeah.
And if one of them's got 1,000 bloody comments, she will have sat and liked every single one, but she hasn't got time to read. And I think you have time to do everything you need to. You're just not using it wisely. And I think that we've kind of been pushed down this road. We haven't got time to go to the gym. We haven't got time to cook properly, so we'll grab some fast food or a microwave meal. We've been pushed that way. So I think turn your phone off for an hour. When you get in from work, turn your phone off for an hour. Make something to eat. Don't go on your phone. I get messages from people at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm thinking, what are you doing at 2 o'clock in the morning on your phone?
Yeah.
I understand if they work nights or
Yeah.
something, but these aren't doing that. They're still wide awake. I'm thinking, you're doing exactly what they want you to do. This little device and this social media platform is now your life. But actually, your life is outside in nature with people you love. And it is not scrolling on endless sort of doom scrolling, and I think that it's people are wasting a lot of their time, and I think that we've been encouraged to do that, but there's definitely something going on
Because attention
and I
seems to
think
be the
that
new currency. Our attention,
yeah,
our energy that we put into things feeds the machine. And the more time we spend feeding the machine, the less time we have to work on ourselves and to make the beneficial changes needed.
definitely. I think keep us distracted. It's key because my dad used to say this when I was a kid. I would buy the Sun newspaper, which is about as bad as it gets over here. It's one up from a comic, and full of all sorts of nonsense. But he used to say to me, and I bought it because I used to do the crossword. That was it. I liked the crossword in it, and it was harder than the one in the Times newspaper. But I used to, anyway, that's just what I did in my lunch break at work. And he said to me, never read the front page. If there's anything important and they have to announce it, it will be a small article on page 2 or page 3. And he's right. We're distracted by things that aren't actually real, by events that aren't taking place, by a potential problem in a country that doesn't actually exist, and I think that is the issue here. They're distracting us. They're taking our time away, and there are a lot of rabbit holes to go down that are there to misdirect. So I think it is using your time wisely. So like myself, I go on social media twice a day, once in the morning to post something and reply to anything from the night before, and then sort of after my dinner, I'll go on for an hour just to reply to anything that I've got during the day, so people don't think I'm ignoring them for 24 hours. But there are people that are on it constantly, and I don't know, are they at work? I mean, does somebody know that they're doing this while they should be working, or are they not working? And they're not working because they're spending all their time on social media and don't have time to go to work.
Yeah.
So I think that's it, isn't it? We're wasting a lot of our time, and often we're arguing with bots as well.
Yeah. Now, for the last few minutes we have, maybe give us your closing thoughts on how to navigate what we may be facing in the near future. And once again, remind the audience how they can find your work.
Well, as I said earlier on, I think that it's really important now that we get rid of this Stockholm syndrome that we've got going on, and understand that we do not need somebody telling us what to do, what to think, what's right and what's wrong. I think we need to detach ourselves from that. And I always say, when people say, "Oh, you're king," King Charles did it, I say, it's not my king. Keir Starmer's not my prime minister. They're nothing to do with me. They're just a couple of people that think they're something that they aren't. Yeah. They've given themselves a position that they don't deserve. I'm not interested in what either of them are doing. And if they're in the street, I don't care. I won't even come out to see them. They're nothing to me. They're not on my radar. I'm on my radar. My family and my friends are on my radar. And I'm not interested in any of these celebrities. Couldn't care less about them. So I think we've got to start looking at ourselves. I think that we've got to realise that it's important to live in the moment. We worry about what we did yesterday and we can't change it. We worry about what we're going to do tomorrow or what's happening tomorrow when it hasn't happened. And we don't live in the moment. And I'm bad at this. We don't live in the moment as much as we should. We don't appreciate the time that we have with people when we get a chance to actually be physically present with them. I think we need to work on that. I think we need to look at how much time we spend on social media. I think that we need to look at our diets, what we listen to, and what we watch as well, and start working on us. And if people could just understand that the reason we have different languages and the reason we're all different shapes and colours and sizes is so we can despise each other. We can get ourselves into little groups where we hate this group for this reason, we hate that group for that reason. This is divide and conquer. It's a Roman tactic. We got to love each other. We can agree to disagree. There are people out there that you're never going to get on with, and you just cut them out your life. Don't waste your energy on them. Don't. Generals only fight big battles, and you're all generals. You're not infantry. You're not cannon fodder. You're worth more than that. So you've got to understand that you only waste your time on things that matter and people that matter. Disengage from everything you're being forced or programmed to watch and believe, and look at what you eat. Look at what you eat. Look at when you sleep. Are you getting enough sleep? It's cool to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning. No, it's not. It's stupid. Your body heals between 10 at night and 2 in the morning. That's when you produce serotonin and antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. To be awake during that time to prevent that process from taking place is not something you want to be telling everybody is a good thing, because it's not. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy and wise. And I think that's really what we've got to do. We've got to look at self-improvement, love, and look at anybody that's a different colour, different race, different religion as being us, just indoctrinated in a different way.
Right on. Great closing thoughts. One more time, let the audience know how they can get a hold of your work.
My website's the best place because it's got links to everything as well. So, if they want to look at Facebook or whatever, they can. So it's called the tartarianempire.co.uk. And .co.uk is important because I want people to know that if they're buying books from my website, they're being shipped from the UK. So I purposely didn't go .com so people can see that I am here in the the United Kingdom, as they call it. So yeah, and then there's YouTube links there, and also I put blogs on there that I can't put on Facebook.
Right. Excellent.
But people might find they're a bit darker.
Excellent. Well, I'll have all those links right in the description. Guy, thank you so much. We'll definitely be doing this again. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We will talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.